Okay, so I think in half a minute or so we can I will hand over to Martin from Yuzuy to.
Yeah, Martin, maybe you can already start to share your screen.
I think
probably you want to
share
present
your
something.
Screen. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Here, this one. You can see it, can't you?
Yes. That looks
Yeah,
good.
great.
Yeah.
Let's move to presentation mode, but start at the beginning. Yeah, Stefan, thanks a lot for the intro and, of course, for the invitation. What a great chance to speak to you experts. And I saw at least one Yuzuy expert already in the list of attendees. So it's not new for everyone, I guess, but probably for some of you. So yeah, hello everyone, and thank you for joining. I'm Martin, I'm from Yuzuy, and would like to talk about how to achieve better RPO on Qumulo systems or for Qumulo systems for the backups of them with Bareos. Yeah, but before I start, I'd like to ask you a quick question. I think it's possible to raise hands, isn't it? Yes, it is. So who is already aware of what Qumulo is and does? So who knows Qumulo already?
There is a hand symbol.
Yeah, second hand.
Yeah.
Third hand. Oh, yes. That's great. Yeah, helps me to know how much I should go into the details. So what Qumulo is it's a file system. It's a file storage, a software-defined storage that lives on Metal, that also lives in the cloud, and is offered by this US company Qumulo. So it's a commercial product, and yeah, as I said, it's a file system with its special and certain strengths. As they state, it's the world's most advanced file system. Yeah, but today I don't sell Qumulo. Actually, I did this in the past. This is part of the story how Yuzuy was founded, but maybe we will be able to talk about this in the end when we have some time left. But how about Qumulo in general? So Qumulo is a scale-out architecture. So if you want to scale in size, in performance, in number of files, in which regard ever you would be able to do this with Qumulo. So it's designed for very large file systems and very large number of files. That's one of its big strengths. Qumulo environments can grow to several petabytes, and they can manage billions of files, even in one directory, if you like. And besides scaling, access is also one of Qumulo's strengths. So it's like that they offer a hub and spoke technology called Cloud Data Fabric, where you can have clusters and cloud solutions around the globe and access all the data on the clusters via the nearest cluster of you. So that's quite new from them, and is very much about data consistency, though there's this hub and spoke configuration with a lease between the files, and it makes sure that somebody who edits a file in like Hamburg and somebody who accesses the file from Cologne or from New York, it's always consistent and you don't have mixed versions and so on. So that's another special thing about Qumulo. So usually the problem with the Qumulo system is not scale. So you can scale in all those ways. But maybe there come some problems when you think about how to back up or back such an environment up. So that's exactly where our integration comes in. So when people think about backup performance, they often think about throughput. So how fast can I move data? How many terabytes per hour can I back up? And of course, that's important and matters. But in large file environments, there's also another problem that is just as important as these. It's how long does it take before the backup can even start? And that has a direct effect on your RPO. So at Yuzuy, we offer tools, especially for Qumulo, so only for Qumulo, and we are very specialized in this, and we have 2 products in total. One is the one we are just looking at, and there's another one for cluster management. And when I speak with backup experts like you, it's often very clear and practical where the challenges are. But generally speaking, with Qumulo admins, by example, about ransomware protection and resiliency, it often goes like this. So who of you should back up your Qumulo system? So there are many hands coming up, but not so many hands when answering the question who is actually doing so. So that's an open problem for many organizations using Qumulo, and I see this again and again, and that's a problem for them, but this is also a chance for you as Qumulo, as Bareos experts, who will be able to help them with this. But what is the problem in detail? So as I said, it's about when the backup would actually start. So if you would back up a large Qumulo file system or any other file system without a dedicated integration, the backup software typically has to walk through the whole file system tree to find out about the changes. And in smaller environments, that's not a problem. When you right-click on a folder in your Windows Explorer or so, and it summarizes the number and size of files, and this takes a couple of minutes, that's fine. But when this is a real large file system, the tree walk can take a very long time. So not minutes, sometimes hours in the better cases, but very often days or even weeks. So the real issue is not only the backup speed itself. The real issue is the backup may be scheduled, but the actual backup may start much later. And that delay hurts your RPO. Because it takes too long just to identify the changes before the backup can start, longer than it would be necessary for frequent backups. So for Bareos users, this is important because Bareos is very flexible, very powerful, and allows certain integrations like this one. But if the storage platform has very large and special characteristics, you need exactly such an integration. And how do we do it? It's based on a snapshot-based detection. So what we do is we take and compare snapshots from Qumulo and let Qumulo make some comparison calculations on it, and then we are able to generate a list of files that should be backed up quite fast. So, and how fast? This is not even with the newest version of our Bareos plugin, but this is a benchmark that we made. So nowadays the green bar may be a bit shorter even. So this is an incremental backup of 50 terabytes of a 1 petabyte, circa 1 petabyte cluster. And without the plugin, you need more than a day to start the backup. Now, you need more than a day to complete the backup. And the blue bar is the time it takes before the backup can even start. It's determining the change data, and the green bar is the actual copy job. And so this blue bar on the top makes it impossible for you to maintain daily backups because it takes longer than a day to even start the backup. But when you shrink this blue bar to a couple of minutes, then you are almost immediately starting the backup. So another important point is performance. So our plugin is optimized for Qumulo. That means it's not just a generic connector with a Qumulo label on it. It's built with the behavior and the scale of Qumulo environments in mind, and the backup volume that we have to handle. That's important because in large file environments, small inefficiency become very expensive. So we focus on practical efficiency, faster change detection, and of course, we also want to copy as fast as possible, and it's optimized also in that way. And next, there's another thing that's special with file systems, or like file systems like Qumulo, that allow for multi-protocol access to your folders. So with Qumulo, you can, by example, access folders via SMB, NFS, also FTP, S3, and so on. And all those access protocols maintain permissions differently. So we have multi-protocol ACLs that we have to back up. And the third key capability of our plugin is simply cost efficiency. So with Bareos and the Yuzuy plugin, we are not the only solution on the market which has a Qumulo integration, but by far the most cost efficient. And also the only open source solution, of course, because as Bareos is, also the plugin has to be open source. So this is again about the ACL. So when you think you are backing up all the data and have it in a backup and be able to restore it, that's great already, but not so great if you lose the permissions, the multi-protocol permissions. So you would be able to restore data, but nobody's able to access it. Or as bad as this, everybody is able to access this, what shouldn't be the case. So here we have a solution integrated that also backs those multi-protocol permissions up and restores them. Yeah, and about licensing, so we like to have things as straightforward as possible. Of course, we have a subscription model for the plugin itself, contains updates and support during the whole subscription time. And secondly, it's optional Bareos subscription support. As everybody of you will know, there's also a community edition of Bareos, but in fact, every organization using the Yuzuy integration or the Qumulo integration by Yuzuy also owns a subscription and support contract with Bareos. I think that comes quite natural in environments like that. And yeah, so for you or for customers, it's important that we have at the least possible finger pointing in the system, and that works really well. So we are partnering really well with the Bareos guys, and no matter if you create a request on their side or on the Yuzuy side or even through, so Qumulo customers do have a Slack channel that they can use for support request, even that is possible. So no matter which entry points, and very little finger pointing in place. So it's really joy to support organizations together with Bareos. Yeah, so to wrap everything up, we are able to start backups fast and have better RPO or acceptable RPO. Yeah, so everything else is practically most of the times not acceptable. We have full fidelity at restore, so we restore all the permissions and have no violations in that regard. And yeah, having the most cost-effective solution on the market is also great. So if there's an organization looking for open source or a cost-effective solution that has a full feature set like Bareos has anyway, and this special Qumulo integration, I think that's a great point. That's the presentation itself. Are there any questions in the meantime in the chat?
No, we have no questions in the chat, but so if anybody has a question, just unmute and ask, or ask something in the chat. Questions are welcome. And otherwise, if there are no questions right now, yeah, maybe also.
I don't know, Frank has raised his hand. I don't know if that was by mistake or if he wants to talk.
No, maybe that was still from the question, who knows Qumulo, and this doesn't appear automatically, I think so. But if he has a question, for sure, ask it.
Yeah, Frank is also an expert, so I think he can also answer most of the questions by himself.
So, but anyway, if there are no current questions, then I would like to hand over to Philip already. So he will talk to us about the Bareos 26 roadmap. And yeah, Philip.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Also, thank you very much, Martin. That was quite quicker than I expected, so I hope I have enough to talk about. But anyway, if we are through, of course, we are always open for any other questions. Okay, yeah. So let me start. So yeah, what I want to talk about today is a bit about the roadmap, what we have planned or partly implemented already for Bareos 26. One thing that we are looking into is writing immediate file marks on tapes, which will hopefully speed up tape usage even more. Then we have some enhancements in the gRPC plugin architecture. We are working to back up Office 365 data. Then also we have planned to have a web UI single sign-on to not rely on the director itself to have users and everything configured, but also get the single sign-on from other login services. Then we have a very interesting community pull request implementing an Incus backup plugin. That's also something I want to talk about. And then also we are cleaning up some things from our code that are deprecated, and we are not going to do anything about this in the future anymore because, for example, some things are end of life. Sorry, that was not the right direction I wanted to go. Okay, so file marks in Bareos. What are file marks? So file marks are marks that when you're doing backups on tape in a regular interval, Bareos writes file marks on tapes, which are something like a point on the tape that the tape can easily access. It allows quick tape positioning. So if you do a restore, then Bareos knows in which file on the tape, which is not the same as a file that has been backed up. So don't intermix this. Unfortunately, it also has the name file. So it knows in which file on the tape. So it's like a chunk of tape where it's stored, and then it can very quickly access it by fast forwarding to that point on the tape and then starting to read, which increases the restore speed very much. Unfortunately, the way that we have been doing this all the time has an impact on tape speed. And here, for example, I have a relatively old picture that we created, I think, some years ago with an LTO6 tape, but in principle, this still applies. So what you can see here is on the vertical axis is the speed in megabytes per second. And on the y-axis and on the x-axis, you have the file size, which is the amount of data that is being written. And always when this amount of data is written, then Bareos will write a file mark on the tape. And as you can see, if we have a relatively small file size, so like 1 gigabyte in this example, then very often a new file mark is written on the tape, and unfortunately that slows down the tapes very much. And the bigger the intervals between the writing of the file marks is, the faster the overall speed results. But of course, the bigger the interval is also during restores, for example, the amount of data that you have to read in average until you really find the data that you want to restore gets also larger. So what Bareos has been doing until now is so-called non-immediate file marks. So a file mark is file mark writing call is sent to the tape. The tape writes a tape file mark. It will then flush the buffers, and it will only come back to our call when the flush is complete. And this usually means that also the tape, I think, even stops and will only go on writing then when the next data comes in. with the immediate file marks that are also available. I don't know exactly, honestly, since when this is available in the tape technology. You can also write a file mark, but instead of flushing the buffer and really waiting to everything being, so all buffers being written to tape, it also can immediately return. And I think I don't know how much it influences the writing speed, but definitely much less than the non-immediate file marks. And we're hoping to speed up the backup speed very much with this. And also, while still we are able to quickly find certain parts on tape during restore. And this is possible when you're writing a file mark in between or during a normal writing. But when we are, for example, stopping a backup job and starting the next one, then of course, always non-immediate file mark will be used, and it will make sure that all the buffers are flushed before the next job starts. Any questions about that? I think in case also, Andreas, you also looked into this matter. Maybe you have something to add to what I said.
Yeah, so the one thing that I think is worth mentioning is the size of the buffer that you are flushing when you do that. So traditionally that has not been a problem in the 90s, for example, but nowadays the LTO drives have buffers that are 1 gigabyte. So you flush a 1 gigabyte buffer and wait for that to land on tape, and then you have to fill it up again. So that actually hurts quite a lot. And also for the diagram you showed, that still said, and you already said it's old, here it says the red line is the standard block size, and the green line is the 1 megabyte block size, and 1 megabyte is nowadays the standard block size. So if you
exactly.
get ideas configuring something, you don't have to do that anymore, because we already changed the standard, because the old thing did not really make sense anymore.
Yeah, exactly. But as I said, that was the picture that I extracted from the very old research that we did on tape speed, and that's also what we found out there, that both the small block size doesn't make sense, and also not to have too small file sizes. And hopefully with the immediate file marks, we will have no bad influence even with smaller file sizes anymore. So that's at least what we expect and what is also documented. So yeah, maybe we can also use now the opportunity to raise the hands. Who of you is really backing up to tape? That would be interesting. Okay, so around 50%. Getting more and more. Okay, yeah, so that's interesting. So really, tape speed obviously still does matter. A lot of people, sometimes we have the impression that a lot of people really do backup to disk, but still backup to tape always is interesting. And yeah, I think, honestly, I don't know how much influence this has on virtual tape libraries, probably also the immediate file marks. The non-immediate file marks will not hurt much, because the virtual tape library will handle all this and abstract it away, I guess, but I'm not sure. So I guess this will mostly really speed up things on real hardware tape drives. Okay, next thing is the gRPC plugin speed enhancements. So we do have a gRPC architecture now that allows to split up the plugin processes on OS level from the backup file daemon itself, which was very handy and required, for example, for certain Python plugins, because the Python plugin because some Python plugins used Python modules that were not thread safe. And thus, if we have been backing up multiple jobs in parallel running on the same plugin, we could have some crashes and other strange effects, just because the Python plugins were not using individual thread local data, and they had shared data, and that unfortunately led to some problems. And now with the gRPC plugin, we have both the opportunity to split up both. So we can start a process for each job that doesn't share any data with another process. And also we will be able in the future even to write plugins that only speak the gRPC API and don't even need any Python or something else. Yeah, maybe as we have Sebastian Sura here, who is mostly the implementer of the gRPC plugin, maybe you can quickly tell us what exactly is the new speed up about. But let me quickly have, I think, one more slide. No, that's already it. So yeah, Sebastian, I think you have some smart ideas how we can implement better the way that the gRPC plugins talk to the file daemon, I think.
Yeah, so when I first implemented the gRPC plugin, I structured the API to look very similar to the API that we use internally for in-process plugins. The issue with that is that function calls inside a process are very cheap, but function calls across process boundaries can be very expensive. And the API itself caused a lot of function calls to be made, which slowed down the plugins a lot. So the new way to do it is that the plugin uses a slightly different, or rather the plugins use a slightly different API, which allow you to basically batch function calls and they don't need to wait for feedback from the core itself. They can just go on and do their thing, and the core will handle everything that it needs to handle. Yeah, and one thing that is also pretty nice with the gRPC plugin that I think you didn't mention is that we could also technically now support older Python versions if that is needed.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, very good. Yeah, so yeah, that's exactly the problem that we had with the Python plugins, is that the basic idea behind it was that we can then simply use the very strong, how do you say it, things that we can, so the versatility of the modules that Python has. So there's a module for almost everything that you might want to do with computers. But unfortunately, also we depend on that, and some modules are not really capable of doing things running in parallel. And by splitting it up, now we should be also, so we lose this problem, and we should be able to really use more or less every Python version, also older or newer versions, and are not depending on incompatibilities between those, as far as we are running them in an own process space instead of running it in our process space as we did before. So that also makes us makes it even possible to run older plugins, for example, that we didn't support anymore because we did have these problems. We can now again use them without having the problems that we had before. Okay, any questions about this topic here, gRPC or plugins? In any case, if you have the question later, you of course also can still ask again. Yeah, so Office 365 plugin. I'm curious, who of you are using or have Office 365 somewhere in your organization and would have the need to back up the data that is stored there? Only one?
Okay, it seems to be not the typical case, because we hear it a lot that people are using this or see it other companies. But yeah, it's good to know that there are a lot of companies not using it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and I think there's also a good, it is logical to really be careful about using it, because of course, on the one hand, it's very handy to have it and you don't have to care about all your data theoretically. But of course, all your data then is in the hands of a different company and you don't even know where your data is, where it is stored. And though, of course, you can be sure that Microsoft will make sure that it's very reliable, in case it goes down, which always can happen, then all your data is gone and you don't even know where it is and how you can get it back. And you cannot even ask a data recovery company, for example, to look for it on the disk that you have, because you have no disks, and even Microsoft doesn't know on which disk your data is. So that's quite of a problem. And so that's why we look into that and want to find a good opportunity to at least have the option to back up all your data from the cloud, so that you at least have the documents that are important for you somehow lying on your own hardware, or at least for example, in the internet, but at least at another vendor that probably is not going down at the same time as Microsoft does. So yeah, so the idea, as always with Bareos, is you need to have the sovereignty over your own data. So our software is open source. You can always recover anything that has been backed up with our software at any time. And yeah, your data stays your data. And the same is the idea about the 365 plugin. So if you have stored your data there, you of course have to back it up and still keep the sovereignty. So we already looked into that, how we could do a plugin like that and have some prototype running. And there's one. The good thing is there's one API that is uniform for everything that is somehow stored in Office 365. It's called Microsoft Graph API. It can access files, I think. Yeah, so the first thing you will be concentrating on files, but I think also other things should be accessible, like calendar information and probably also emails, but I don't know exactly what that status is. But the first thing we are going to implement is to back up the normal file storage there. Yeah, we have been testing some things there, and in principle, it already looks quite well. Interesting also is the access rights and files are relatively complicated, because in principle, I think the files are stored in a SharePoint folder, and there the access rights really can become quite complicated. And yeah, we are trying around having a good contact to someone who has really a lot of knowledge in that space. And yeah, it's interesting. I think it will be very useful when we have it. And let me think about. Also, Sebastian is the one that implemented the things that we have until now. Sebastian, have I forgotten something, or do you want to add something?
No, I think you got pretty much everything. But maybe I can mention the progress in the testing goes very well, so it should not take too much longer to finish it. So it will definitely be part of 26. At least that's the current status.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so any question regarding this topic? But I think as only one of you is using it. But yes, I think it's quite good that this opportunity will be available. Yeah, then another topic we plan for Bareos 26 is to have Web UI single sign-on, like, for example, OIDC. In Bareos 25, users and passwords are defined in the director, or alternatively, we are also able to contact on the operating system where the director is running. We can also use pluggable authentication module functionality for passwords, but that is more or less the old way of doing things. And in these days, modern web applications, of course, usually have a central login mechanism that you can use. And then we want also to integrate the web UI into something like this. And the technology that we're looking into is OIDC. And the idea behind is that you can more or less just log into the web UI interface, just as you would also to any other web service, for example, that you have in your company, and you have a central deployment of users and access rights, and we are also taking part in that logic. Yeah, let me think if I forgot something. No. Andreas, as you, I guess, have the deepest knowledge about this, maybe together with Sebastian Lederer, maybe you want to add something, or?
Not really. So the idea is basically that you don't have to configure users in Bareos anymore. You just have to configure the profiles with the ACL, and then the OADC system can decide if a user has access to Bareos and which profile should be assigned, and then you are done with it, which is probably a lot easier than right now people doing Active Directory, LDAP synchronization with scripts and PAM authentication. So I hope that gets easier to set up and easier to use for everybody.
Thank you, Andreas. Is that something that someone of you is interested in? Maybe who is using the web UI with multiple users and would like to have something like this? Okay, so 3 people, 4. Okay, so I guess most of you are just using the command line, right? Yeah, then next really interesting thing coming from the community is the Incus backup plugin. Honestly, I have to admit that I also didn't know much about the Incus project. Incus, I just took this from the website. Incus is a next generation system container, application container, and virtual machine manager. So from the functionality, it is a bit comparable to Proxmox, which probably everybody knows more, I guess. It's really a quite interesting thing. You can do a lot of in principle, as far as I understood and what I tried out, it seems to be able to do more or less almost everything that Proxmox also does. They have a quite nice interface. And yes, now even I'm not exactly sure if the one that's programming the plugin really is also part of the Incus project, but at least it is already advancing quite well. I think we already have basic functionality there, and we are doing the pull request reviews together and working on that together with him. And it will be able to do full incremental and differential backups. And yes, that's definitely a very interesting technology. And I'm wondering why it's not so well known, the Incus project. At least I didn't hear much about it. I think the person creating the plugin is from France. Maybe in France it's more popular, I don't know. But definitely it's a very interesting project that everyone who has to do with container virtualization and also KVM, I think they have below it, might have a look at it and try it out, because at least I have a very good impression from that. And in the future, you also will be able to do good backups of your machines if you're using it, which is nice. Any questions regarding this? So if not, then let's quickly come to the cleanup. So, okay, we already have some features where the project behind it, for example, I think the Gluster project is end of life and is not supported by Red Hat anymore. I think that's the case. And that's, for example, why we now decided in Bareos 26 to remove the Gluster FS support. We have used the droplet library to back up to S3 storages. And the droplet library, unfortunately, had some limitations, especially when you have real AWS, for example, behind it, and you get HTTP redirects for a different server for a bucket. I think that was not followed correctly. And now, as we have the droplet compatibility plugin that is in principle able to do exactly the same, but does not have the limitations that Droplet does, we now remove the Droplet library and will only support the, what exactly is the name, Andreas?
DPL compat.
DPL compat, sorry, I just forgot about it. So the DPL compat backend is able to do exactly the same and also to restore things that have been backed up with the old droplet library. So we have a one-to-one drop-in replacement, and that's why we can remove it. And then also we inherited the let me quickly. So the old possibility to have deduplication based on a common backup image that we had before, and that is already something that we deprecated, I think, already 2 years ago. And now we are going to remove the part of the database catalog that was required to implement this functionality, and we will be able to much better optimize the database queries, because the database queries now don't have to also include the possibility that there is a common base job that also might contain files, for example. So the queries will become much more straightforward, and we should be able to make the database access also much faster without these old base file tables. So that's it, what I prepared. So from now on, we are here to answer any question that you might have. Please feel free to talk, to ask questions. Yeah, please just
unmute and speak.
Sure. I would actually have a question on the DPL compat thing. We were very interested in using object storage, but Droplet was unmaintained and also technically incompatible with like the Azure Blob storage that we wanted to use. So I think my main question would be, is it generally also compatible with the Bareos always incremental stuff? Like how would the rewrites then happen in object storage, because that works a bit differently than in a traditional file system?
It just works like it would have worked with the droplet itself. So it does read all the data from the bucket because it reads the whole volume, and then it creates a new one. So basically what's happening on disk would also happen on the object storage, just one-on-one.
Yeah, but I think the issue is that if you have traditional storage in the server which runs the Bareos SD, then it is no network traffic involved. And if you have a remote cloud storage S3 compatible provider and your backup server which runs the Bareos SD runs on-premise, then you will have for sure, correct me if I'm wrong, Andreas, then you will have for sure all the network traffic going to and from the S3 compatible storage, right?
Exactly.
So it could be an option if you have that on Azure, that you could let run virtual machine on Azure, which is running the SD and accessing the S3 storage. So that could be a helpful workaround in that case. Does that make sense? But technically, generally, it's should work fine.
Okay. Yeah, we have the storage endpoints themselves on Azure as well, so the network traffic itself should at least be free.
So the only culprit is if you are basically paying for reading your objects. Always incremental will have to read all the objects to look at the volume to create a new one. So it will download everything and then basically upload the same data into a different volume. That's just the way the virtual backups work in Bareos. And we can't have any shortcuts currently because it's agnostic to the backend. So you could read from a tape and write to an object storage. And that's why we don't have any shortcuts.
Yeah. I think what generally would help us to at least consider it is, from what I've seen, the documentation on how to work with the DPL compat thing is a bit limited. Not sure if you would be able to extend that a bit on like how would I actually get a working storage endpoint that I can use in Bareos. That would help at least us a lot too, because now we just are a bit afraid of adopting it because the engineering efforts would just be too much for us to do it on our own.
Probably. I'm not really sure what's lacking. That's like it's always the case if the person who implemented it writes the documentation, everything that's not written there is obvious to the writer, but not to everybody else. So if I knew what was missing, I could write it down. But on my own, it's a bit hard to figure out.
Okay, but yeah, the inputs themselves were already helpful. So I guess we will look into it again. It might be worth considering for us. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, for sure. Any feedback is always welcome. So, yeah, any further questions?
Yeah, I think we had some question in the chat. So yeah, about web UI. So yeah, definitely we are on it to get a better web UI and also to have a way of configuring Bareos well. But as we are currently not exactly sure how we want to do it, that's why I didn't exactly mention it, because it's not totally clear how we want to implement it. So the goal definitely is, on the one hand, to have a modernized web UI like that is fast enough to really quickly do any task that you want to do there, and also to have the possibility to easier configure Bareos in a way that you are assisted and are required to do it on the command line and in files, but also you can get assistance to get it configured. But the goal is clear, but the way is not yet, and that's why I didn't write much here yet. But definitely that's something we are looking into, and we definitely will do something about that.
Yeah, another question is regarding Proxmox. So as some of you may have noticed, we already have a plugin for Proxmox, but it still can only do full backups. So the question is regarding our plans on implementing incremental and differential for the Proxmox plugin.
Yes, so I can maybe go a bit into detail there. So when we started implementing the Proxmox plugin, the API to implement incrementals or differentials for Proxmox was not yet stable and not yet released. That is why we didn't target that. We do have plans to do that, but it's a lot more complicated than the plugin that we have right now. So you have to implement some Perl component that will be installed into Proxmox. And then we will have to somehow make that talk to a plugin in the file daemon. And the way you do backups are completely different from the way you do restore in Proxmox. For whatever reason, it doesn't work the same. Yeah, let's not say it's not the same. It's really actually completely different. And we have to find a good way to do that well, which would be simple if we didn't support object storages or tape. So yes, there are plans to do that, but it's not simple, sadly.
Yes, so yeah, it's always a question of prioritization, and the implementation of incremental and differential in Proxmox will be a relatively high investment on our side. So not so many people really asked for it. So we are always happy to hear from you customers if you say, yes, I absolutely need that. And of course, for us, always it's interesting also if someone would like to sponsor the development for that, at least partly, so that we get somehow the investment there covered, because we always have to think about in which direction we want to develop the things and what are the higher priorities. Of course, we have our own ideas about that, but we always are interested, of course, getting the feedback from the community and of course of the users. And that's also why we didn't do this yet, because obviously, though the technology below Incus is close to what Proxmox uses, the way of doing backups seems to be much more simple there if you do incrementals or differentials. And we have to see when the Incus plugin is done if we maybe also could do the same technology when accessing what Proxmox does, or because if we need to use their API, that will be relatively hard for us, as Andreas already said, because they expect the storage to be random access, which we are usually not. We have a backup stream, and that means that we then have to recover everything that might be called randomly before we can really do the recovery. And that is much bigger effort on our side and needs much more extra work for Proxmox than usually we do to support a backup or recovery plugin. So that is a very high invest in time from our side. That's why we didn't do this yet.
Yeah, thanks, Philip. Daniel Neuberger. Hi, Daniel. Nice to see you here. Daniel did read about new ideas for a configuration tool and if there are already some fixed directions for a prototype. So as far as I know, Philip, correct me if I'm wrong, the idea is to at least have a very easy way, a wizard-like thing to get to a really good best practice matching configuration without having to edit a lot of configuration files, right?
Yeah, that's of course one part of it. The other is that the idea is that it is not really limited to one director and one storage daemon and then multiple clients, but really to have a tool that can also configure multiple directors, multiple storage daemons, and multiple clients, because especially in bigger environments, you sometimes have multiple installations. And like it is in these days with cloud things, in the end, you just want to make sure that the client is being backed up, but you don't care on which storage daemon and on which director it's going to be backed up. So the API should be something like, I want to add a new client and it needs to be backed up. And it is here and has this IP address. And then theoretically, the configuration tool itself can determine, okay, what is the nearest storage daemon that has enough space and what is the director that can take over this backup. And then it can just add all the configuration to the right part without being limited to just one installation. So that's at least my idea, that it is not limited to one director. So it somehow needs to be a tool that is looks from the outside over the whole system and is not limited to just one director, for example. And so the ideas are there, but as I said, we are not really yet doing something there, and that's also why we don't really have a prototype. So I think the ideas are quite far, but we don't have something to show yet.
Yeah, Daniel.
So hi, nice to see you again too. So that means, Philip, when I understand you correctly, you say you want also something to implement which decides by itself where are the resources free to back up the configuration.
That would be the capability that I definitely want to have in it, though it will not be the first thing to implement. But when the architecture is thought about, it definitely needs not to be limited to just one director and one client, though this usually is probably what most people have. But I don't see, but it doesn't make sense to limit ourselves to that. So it should also be possible to run on multiple directors and on multiple storage daemons. And no matter if the administrator manually decides where it should be attached and where it should be backed up, or in the future, maybe if a bigger installation is there, we also could think about like backup as a service. If you have a big environment, then you just can say, okay, I need to back up this machine, and I just tell the configuration tool, here's another client, please give me the configuration and attach it to the right system that is closest, and it will be backed up without that you have to do it manually. That's the idea why I think it makes sense to be able to configure the whole system that is much bigger than just one director.
And this decision making could be a part of the director, or there must be there something like a new control pane?
No, that's exactly what I mean. It needs to be outside of the director because
outside. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds interesting. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So Frank Kohler, hi Frank, nice to meet you here. He asks if we already see requests for the backup of OpenDesk environments. So OpenDesk is, I think, a web-based office and collaboration suite developed for the German public sector to ensure digital sovereignty. And I'm not aware if we have already requests seen for that. Anybody seen? I mean, that's a very interesting thing for digital sovereignty for sure. And I think it's also completely open source, if I'm not wrong. So
yeah, so it's basically Nextcloud, Open Project, Open Exchange, Element, Jitsi, and some more things.
Yeah.
So most of these can already be backed up with Bareos, but for actually asking for OpenDesk has not yet happened. So but that doesn't mean people don't do it, but nobody asked for it. At least not that I'm aware of.
Okay, so we have another question from Atame regarding a blog post about configuration as code. Yes. Okay. Yeah, okay, that was not very technically detailed blog post as far as I know. So yeah, it always depends. There are many options of doing configuration management. I think the most popular ones currently are Ansible and maybe Puppet. Yeah, as Bareos is completely configured by text files, which have a good structure, this is for sure always needs to be adapted to the current requirements. We do not have something generic that we can provide here. At least I do not know of it, but maybe Andreas, do you know something interesting in this area?
Not really. So we have quite a few customers that did that for their own environments, at least in Puppet and Ansible. But the value you get out of that is that you basically dump down what you can do with the configuration management to work in the limits or the decisions you took for your site. So the thing is, if we just provide something that allows you to configure every knob in Bareos using Ansible, that does not add a lot of value, because then you have, instead of complicated and big Bareos configuration files, you now also have complicated large Ansible roles, which just provide the same functionality. And that's why this usually is not what people use. So,
Yeah.
But having a starting point is probably not a bad idea.
Yeah, I see. For example, that on Ansible Galaxy there are some things.
Especially one compat Venus. Unfortunately,
yes,
plastic is
exactly.
already gone.
Oh, yeah, that. I didn't notice that. That's why.
Maybe you have seen the question and just disappeared.
I would have liked to ask him. Yeah. Yeah, so maybe that's helpful. If I don't know, Atami, which configuration as code. Yeah, you named Ansible or Puppet, so yeah, maybe you can find something helpful on Ansible Galaxy as a starting point. So yeah.
I think Daniel wanted to say something, maybe.
Yeah. So in the so what it matters when it comes to configuration as a code. So so what I think is Bareos really great is that it's configuration as a code, and you can do something really good things. There are not so it would be not too complicated to give some customers the advice. So do it with an Ansible. So if you have a quite good Ansible collection, you can combine it with a GitHub. You can combine it with a containerized GitLab. You can check in the configuration. So instead of writing complicated configuration, you must think of writing just some YAML files with some variables. You do a git add, git commit, a git push, and then you also can implement, especially with MHVTL, you can implement some good CI pipelines. So if you have something in your working package, then you can give this to the customer as well. And you also can test in the background before you are staging it into production what you are configuring. So so relying on a good Ansible collection maybe could be a good strength for the future also as well. So I think it would be it is so. I also met some customers. For them, it's easier to just define some variables in a YAML file instead of creating complete new Bareos configuration files and deploy them via SCP or something else. So there is a good strength when you combine it with a Git and with a good Ansible collection. So actually, thanks for the point for the at Finish. I wasn't aware of that. It looks quite good, but it's also not really. It's a quite big finished collection. It seems so. It is. Is it also where there's some people from them? I understand in this expert circle too. No.
Yes, but already left.
Already left.
Yes,
so
unfortunately, already.
I had some. So what? Yeah. Okay. I have some questions to them for that collection.
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
Maybe you could ask them for one of the next expert circle if they will give a presentation about this. That would be
maybe you could do a good expert circle about that, combining it with a Git or something.
Why not?
Because I wasn't aware of that. Looks really good, very, very comprehensive. So
yeah, it's already on GitHub. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's also and it's good documented, and then it's also all the guiding styles for the Ansible Galaxy are also fit. So it looks really, really great and good.
Yeah, thanks for the question and the additions. So